May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Today we celebrate Candlemas, a major festival of the Christian Church. Time to break out the foie gras and a little manzanilla, or at the very least a couple of squares of chocolate. As you know, some people say, they almost seem to complain, that Christianity simply took over existing pagan festivals and made them part of the church's calendar. And today, Candlemas is no exception. For the Celts, the first 2 days of February were dedicated to their mother goddess, who rejoiced in the name of Brig. The same 2 days were kept by farmers as the time to give thanks for the return of milk to their ewes and the removal of cows from the field they'd been manuring during the winter. And so, yes, perhaps the church did suppress the worship of the goddess Brig, for which the black cocks that used to be sacrificed are doubtless heartily grateful. But even nowadays, I can watch the cattle being moved out of the fields next to me. And presumably the lactation habits of ewes haven't changed much either. So that aspect of things was never lost. Imagine our church, the Abbot's Church, Sulhamstead, 500 years ago. The whole village would be here, including the farmers, especially the farmers, because they wanted to keep on God's good side and there was a lot to be thankful for. Every week of the year, the whole people would have come together and prayed prayers and sung songs that their ancestors had sung together for centuries, as would every church in the land. The liturgy and worship in all the churches round here would have been identical. So on this day, this major feast, as the gospel was read, the story of the ancient prophet Simeon meeting the 40-day-year-old Jesus in the temple and recognizing him as the light of the world. On this day, and this day alone in the year, the whole congregation would have stood listening to the story, holding a lighted candle to acknowledge the light of the world who enlightens even us. Not only throughout the whole of this land, but the whole of Europe, all the colonies and Americas, everywhere there was a church. Everyone, grandparents, parents, children, uncles and aunts, the whole village would have been there. Not because they had to be, but because it was a beloved and popular tradition. Even the king had a candle, though he let the Lord Chamberlain hold it for him. After the service, people would have gone around the village in procession, wearing their best clothes, and in the evening, perhaps a little too much, might have been drunk. All in all, a joyful and blameless celebration, you might think. But the Reformation tore it out of people's lives. It was all superstition, they declared, and in 1548, the Duke of Somerset, may he rest in peace, the Duke of Somerset pronounced the keeping of Candlemas illegal. To hold a candle at the gospel would have become a criminal offence. Now is not the time to discuss the pros and cons of the Reformation. It happened, perhaps it had to happen, and what emerged from it certainly had the seeds of a lot of good in it. But also, at its core, the Reformation had, and continues to have today, the toxic remnants of the murderous hatred with which it was carried out. So much blood, so much suspicion, such division, a state of affairs that continues to this day. If the church before the Reformation was the Titanic heading for its iceberg, if the people were thrown into the water, well, all the survivors came up clutching, well, after the Reformation, they all came up clutching a piece of the faith. A piece of the faith. The hatred and division continued. People began to defend what they'd received and to attack what anybody else had found. And they began to define themselves not by what they believed, but by what they didn't believe. Not by what they'd do in church, but what they wouldn't do. It's a miracle how close Christians have managed to hold each other. Even nowadays, if you wanted to call all the Christians in our villages together, you'd know where to find them, you'd know who they were. You could gather them together in one of our fields or at Ufton Court, say, and they would come. Christians know each other and they feel for each other, even after the Reformation. But if we did that, if we gathered together in our hundreds in some large space in our villages, we'd start talking. And despite our friendliness, would we still find ourselves saying things like, "Ooh, I'm not sure of that. Oh no, I don't think it says that in our Bible. Oh, you'd never find me doing that. No, I'm not keen on these songs. Not going to sing those. That lot down the road, they're no better than they ought to be." I suppose this sermon is my belated address for the week of prayer for Christian unity. And I can finish it by quoting not any of our Candlemas readings. You can read them and the commentaries I've made of them for yourselves. Not quoting them, but from one of the foundation texts from the times of the biblical patriarchs. Israel, the man, it was a man's name, of course. Israel, the man otherwise known as Jacob. Let's call him Jacob because in this context that's what he's usually called. Jacob, you'll remember, wrestled with an angel. He wrestled with an angel all night until daybreak. Then the angel said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And so the angel blessed him. That's my message for Candlemas. If Christians disagree, if ever they find themselves on opposite sides, if ever it comes to a fight, there are two rules of engagement. First, Christians fight so as not to let go. Christians fight so as not to let go. And when eventually they do let go, they part from each other with a blessing.